In this video, we finally break down the brake system. Break down the brake system. It's the moment everyone's been waiting for. How did this guy use engine compression to charge a brake system to push what inside of the brake drums out against the drums to stop this car? These four pieces, four on each side, are in the place, what I believe originally there was brass petcocks here with a little bowl cast in the top, so they were priming bowls, priming cocks, so you could prime the engine. So it looks like he tapped into the piston chambers for compression with these teed off here. And what's interesting is, so all four are connected on this bank, and it flows over out of here. So this is is a way of him terminating. Instead of a plug, he's got this. It looks like when I took this off, there was a ball in there, so that when this is seated down all the way, it actually is not just relying on this crimp, that there actually is a solid piece in there. And then under here, it looks like there's a ball as a check valve, so that, because I was wondering, you know, when the piston goes back down, is it sucking the compression back away from your brake system? Because obviously it needs to have one-way valve. So I believe these are check valves. Anyway, so these are all connected, and it runs over on that hose there, or I should say that pipe, that tube here, which then is also connected to the banks on this side. This has a legit plug. So they're both connected, and then it goes, there's a T here, and this piece is loose. I don't know what that's for. But, so you've got now 8 cylinders pumping compression through here. This piece is just a quick disconnect of everything here. And then through this piece, and this is just a big one-way valve with this brass ball in there. And you got the spring here. So basically, the air will come in through the bottom underneath the ball, go up when the ball rises, then it goes into this chamber. Then the casting actually allows the passageway to curve back down to here. So it goes in here, up past the ball, then down and through here. So this isn't a straight shot. It's separated, has to go past the ball and then down. And so you got this spring and those holes cut. This looks like a safety release valve if it's too much pressure. Then we come over here into a pipe bomb, small canister. Then this goes to the gauge on the dash, showing you your PSI. And then this carries over to your valve that's operated by your brake pedal to give you air to all 4 brakes. Now let's head back here. So this goes to this small canister, but we still have air going pumped compression wise through here, through this hose, which I'll show you down low, goes to a bigger can. This hose comes down from that T by the little canister on the firewall, and then actually goes to the big reserve tank. And so he's got it screwed off, hose clamp to the fitting, and then he's got it safety wired so it won't blow off, I guess. Anyway, and then where he used to be able to put tools and stuff, above the passenger side running board, he's got a big tank in there. And I don't know why it's ripped open like this. I guess somebody wanted some access to it that wasn't too concerned about appearances. Anyway, and I wonder what this line is and why it's wired off like this. There's a way of holding it in there. But so this would be the big tank then for his air pressure. reserves or holding. So here we have your valve that's operated by your brake pedal. You know, as polished as some of his other work is, some of this stuff looks pretty hokey, and I wonder if it's just because for years it's had another owner or two since Mr. Ward, and they've sort of messed with it, because, you know, using this as a shaft to hold this in is kind of weird. Obviously, you know, this punch here to hold this to the arm is not going to work because it can come right out. In fact, I'm going to take it out so I can, this valve is a bit stuck right now. But so when you bring down your brake pedal in here, I don't know if you can see that, but that arm comes down. So this is your brake arm underneath your pedal, come through the floor, and then it has this bar. That bolt there holds this horizontal shaft on there, and that horizontal shaft comes forward and then hits this lever. You can see that. So anyway, the brake arm comes forward, hits this lever, and the lever moves this back and forth. It's interesting that the lever that it hits has a spring on it, so that if you push past the stopping point of the valve, your pedal can still have some movement, so that you don't overpower the valve. It's got a spring-loaded arm that the brake pedal comes forward, hits the arm moves this. But if you push too hard, the arm will actually bend on a spring pressure. It's kind of neat. Hard to see in there, but it is as I say it is. And anyway, then it would push this valve up, and then it would give you air out this side, up and around, and then it branches off to your two front brakes, and then it has a line going to the back brakes, which then separates above the axle like a lot of hydraulic cars, and then goes to each brake in the back. Not sure if there's supposed to be something on this side, what that's all about. Also, I'm not sure, because this is your inlet with air from your canister, waiting for your brakes to be used to then go out to your brakes. But it's teed off into this, which is broken down there. So I wonder where this is going. So prior to hitting your brakes, this would be pressurized. Let's see if we can find out what's going on. Wait, before we go into that, let's look at a stock setup so you can see what Cadillac did originally on this 28 chassis I've got, and then you can compare that to what's been changed and what's been done on my Cadillac by Mr. Ward when he modified it. Now here we have a 28 Cadillac chassis that has all the mechanical bits on it for the brakes. So originally you would be hitting the brakes and you'd be stopping via the mechanical power of the levers and cables, not the air power of this guy's invention. So you'd be tugging on these cables up to here, which would pull this lever, and then it would twist through into the drum. And then here's our front brakes inside. So when that shaft, I should say, twists here, and then it pulls this lever upwards, and then you're basically pulling this direction, which would then try to straighten out this bent line. And when you're trying to straighten that out, it'll actually make this distance from here to here greater, which will then expand your inner band brake to make the diameter bigger here, and then it would rub on the inside of your drum. The rear brakes have band brakes, not shoes, and you have an outer band here, which is your main brake that restricts the drum as it turns, and then on the inside it's actually a round band that expands, I believe is the parking brake. So you've got two levers coming here, one on an inner shaft, one on an outer shaft, and then one does the work on the outside and the other one is for doing the work on the inside. There's a good shot from the owner's manual. So you can see an outer band and an inner band with the drum in between there in the cutaway. And so that inner one, you pull that lever and it would actually, let's see here, pull this lever, and then it would pull those two other arms and then try to straighten those arms out, making it wider and then opening up that inner band and dragging for the parking brake. Okay, now we can go back to what Mr. Ward did to this Cadillac, and we'll start with the front brakes. So he's removed what was the original innards to this thing, and then he's made this killer aluminum housing which bolts to the 4 points there, and then he's plumbed in your air, and then it Ys, and I should say it comes in here and then it Ys over to here and here. He's got 6 shoes on here, and they appear to be spring loaded, and I've already started working out one of these pins up here. You can see the pin there. If I get steady. So it's a pin holding the end of a spring, and the spring is just poking through. And I believe that will allow me to take off the shoes. It's interesting to note some of these marks here. He's got 8 here, a pair of 8s, a pair of 7s, we'll work our way around, a pair of 11s, number 103, and then a pair of 10s there, and I'm assuming they maybe correlate to the shoes, so you don't get them mixed up with others. And then there should be a rubber bladder in here, which I've discovered a spare one. I got a bunch of spare parts. Some are what he prototype stuff, but I found this here, and so looks like this would be inside here if it wasn't so brittle, and then it would curves around, and then this actually inflates with the air pressure just enough to kick the shoes out a little bit against the drum. The drum over here. So I got the shoes removed from the front drum. They're marked, the 2 dots here, 10, 10, 11, 11. I don't see anything down there. And they do correlate to each shoe that's come off. So the 2 dots are here to match the 2 dots here. And then 10 here, 10 here. So that would go on here like so. And then this one's marked with the 10 and 11. So 10 and 11, that goes there. And then there's a third one down there. It's held together by this spring that actually routes through each one of these, through all 3, and then I have to get this end through this slot here so that I can then put this pin through it, but on the back side of this. So in order to string that through, I'm guessing I gotta get some baling wire or something, wire it to here, string it through, put everything up on here, then pull it out the top tight, get the pin in it, then get that wire off. And then in here is the air bladder that gets a little bit bigger with air pressure, obviously, and I guess his adjustment is these shims, because these came out with it. So these shims were sitting on top of the air bladder, like so, and then the shoes on. So if adjusting your brakes was hard on some cars, consider having to not getting the braking power you wanted, having to come here, pull everything off, cut and add another shim and put it on there and test it out, because there's no other way to get a real easy adjustment here. There's no moving around. This is one solid cast aluminum piece. So this got to go up in there, eh? All right, let's see if I can have enough hands to put this on is a lot of stuff. Okay, all right, okay, I can do it. So we'll string this through here. That wasn't hard at all. All right, check this out. So this is the cross shaft for the emergency brake. So when you pull your emergency brake or your parking brake up there above the transmission, you're pulling this lever, and he's added a lot of leverage there. Look at that, man. Seems to be the opposite of leverage. Actually, you're pulling down here and trying to have this move against your emergency brakes. But okay, anyway, so this is your parking brake setup. But what's interesting is he has tied into it here granite, sort of rudimentary, but he's got it tied into this piece. Now this piece, you can see there's a lot of room for movement there. This is actually connected to the brake pedal as well. So when I said earlier that the brake pedal hits a separate lever to operate your air brakes, and that lever that it hits has a spring on it, a heavy spring, so that at a certain point you can push past it without overpowering the mechanical stop ending point of the valve. It'll allow you to continue to push the brakes to the floor even though the valve is done moving, if that makes sense. And now I see why he did that. That's interesting. So if you go past the air brake portion of your foot pedal, I assume that then you'll run out of slop here, and then your brake on the floor will actually be operating the parking brake or the emergency brake. So if your air brakes fail, you just push a lot harder on the pedal. It'll pass the point of using the air brakes and actually start to operate the rear emergency brakes. Although, again, the way some of this looks, it doesn't look like maybe it's completely reliable, but it's something. At least he's thinking ahead, because there's a lot of things about the air brakes that look to me like they could fail on the Rocky Mountains, which he claimed he went over the Rockies with this thing, and then it got a little hairy. Yeah, he would want something else, but it is interesting that he plumbed all this in to the emergency brake, but you still have the lever in the car by the trans to use the emergency brake, so you could just reach over and pull that, but I guess this be easier to just push the pedal further than the air brakes to really try to stop this thing. Or maybe it's more or less in conjunction with, not in an emergency, but if you got to hit the brakes really hard, you're using your air brakes and the mechanical emergency brakes all at the same time for a very abrupt stop. So it's just little extra brakes at the end of your air brakes. So we come back to towards the rear here, and those the emergency brakes, the parking brakes, continue with the shaft here and another arm that he has added length to run back to the wheel. And that's done on both sides. And then runs back. So the front wheel came off pretty standard. It's got a spindle, hubcap comes off, cotter key comes out. It's got an interesting way of locking the nut to the spindle. But the rear, I'm gonna sneeze. Anyway, the rear has this spring here, this locking spring that I gotta pop off. And then apparently, according to the manual, I gotta take the shaft out. Then I can get in there and take a nut off to remove this thing. So the back, much like the front, air comes in, tees off, goes to each side. The difference being that this has two separate aluminum housings versus one complete circle aluminum housing in the front. And each still has 3 shoes apiece with a spring running through it with a bladder. What's unique, however, about the rear is that you still have mechanical ability by these 2 shafts sticking through the backing plate. They twist, and they have flats on them, and they twist with the use of the levers and rods here. And much like a vintage motorcycle hub, they twist and it spreads the 2 halves apart. In this case, it spreads the 2 housings, but in a motorcycle, it would spread 2 shoes apart and allow you to still have a mechanical ability to slow down or stop this vehicle. The housings aren't bolted tight to the backing plates. You can see that the studs and the castle nuts there go through holes that are oval in shape so that each housing half can actually move up and down as they're spread apart by the twisting of those 2 shafts with the flats on them. So to the best of my knowledge, here is the system on the Cadillac. So here's your V8 up here. You got 8 banks represented by these dots. Each one of these dots represents a one-way ball valve. So when your piston goes back down, it's not sucking air back out of your system. So piston comes up and charges at each one of these dots. And both of the banks come together at this juncture. This juncture also has a mystery line that is just sitting open over here. I'm not sure what that's for. But all 8 are charging and running pressure through this large one-way check ball valve. And then we get to here, we've got a safety release valve if the pressure gets too high. And then it ties together here, but it mainly is charging your reservoir, but also coming up through this small reservoir or chamber, and then over to your gauge, which is that repurposed acetylene pressure gauge on the dash. And then from here runs over to your brake pedal with your air valve. And then when you operate your brake pedal, and by the way, this line's pressurized, and then again it goes to here, and I'm not seeing what that's for. Again, it just goes to a rubber hose and then it's cut. I'm not sure what that was about. So you move your valve, and then air is put into your air lines to your 4 corners of your car. I believe this is your release. So when you let off the pedal, you can release some pressure out here and really relax the air bladders in all 4 corners of your car. So anyway, hit the brakes, rush air up to the fronts, and each bladder expands and pushes the 3 shoes per bladder outwards. That's each half, 3 on each half, out against the inside of your drum, and then relaxes when you let off the air. And then we run back and to the back. Now your bladders are set a different way, top and bottom versus front and back, and expand and contract. And then if you recall, either if you push the brake pedal further than your air valve, or if you pull your parking/emergency brake, mechanically you can separate both aluminum housings that contain the rear air bladders outwards for mechanical braking power. If you saw some of my older videos on this Cadillac, I discussed Westinghouse air brakes on passenger cars that I discovered in some old classified ads and some newspapers from the early 1930s. Some cars that were being sold with the famous Westinghouse air brake conversion, which is interesting because I had only heard of the air brakes on big trucks and of course trains. So perhaps, as I said then, this air brake Cadillac wasn't a novel idea at the time because other people were trying to do air brakes. So I ordered some booklets on eBay to sort of show what the Westinghouse system looked like compared to our system on the Cadillac. One of the booklets I found on eBay was passenger car air brakes, or passenger car brake system from the Westinghouse air brake company, and found out this just means the railroad passenger cars, so this isn't for cars. But what is cool is I was flipping through it and I went, whoa, what's that in the pages? This is pretty cool. Not related to our Cadillac, but if you like old stuff, you like this, so check that out. Emergency clearance card from the Kansas City Terminal Railway Company. But what's even cooler than that is what this old writing says on the back. Wanted a single girl with good reputation who can cook frog legs and who can stand a little future fun at parties and frolicking without getting sick. Apply. So here we go. Automotive air brake equipment, Westinghouse Air Brake Company, Automotive Division. This is May 1929, and definitely has some cool stuff in here. They're using an air compressor that's turned by the engine versus our Cadillac uses cylinder compression, so making the engine its own compressor. Sort of similar here. We got a tank, reservoir, runs up pressure regulator and pressure gauge, and so we're running over. So here we go. Brake chambers 1, 2, 3, and 4. So these are diaphragms, and with the pressure put to the brakes, they'll move. So with this Westinghouse system, if you were to install this on a car, basically you're eliminating all of the leg power to push the brake pedal as a lever, which then operates rods and other levers to run to all 4 corners of your car to operate all 4 individual brakes. So instead you would run air lines and then have these diaphragms at all 4 corners, and then the air diaphragms would operate what is still the stock setup within or at or around each drum. So you're not actually changing the stock setup of the car at the wheel. Whereas this Cadillac is unique in the fact that there has been some novel recreating of the internals to have the air operation within the drum. I'm just assuming that when we read or hear about the cars I talked about from the 30s with the famous Westinghouse conversion, that somebody just applied that air brake system. Instead of putting it on a truck, they just put it on a car. You still have a big set of frame rails, you still got mechanical brakes to operate with the diaphragms and all that stuff. So I'm gonna just sort of assume it's the same thing, because I'm not having any luck finding any booklets just for passenger cars. So it appears, even if it says automotive air brake, it just means automobiles as far as trucks and trailers. One of the bladders that was in with the spare stuff, and then here's a front aluminum housing that would be for the front here, hole for the bladder, and then again that spring has to be brought through the hole here and then pop out that side to get that pin in there. Now, I've got 4 of these guys, which I assume to be prototypes. They're steel with studs welded on. They've got some bladders in there, and then steel shoes, whereas these are aluminum. And looks like, yeah, there's a spring pulled through there that coils its way down and around, and yeah, ends up on the other side. So these are interesting. Excuse me. This appears to have one spring that goes all the way around to this side. Gosh, that would be a pain. He's got these marked too with numbers to correlate to stuff, to correlate to the shoes. So this is a bit more rudimentary, and then this is a nice cast aluminum piece and polished. I wonder if these studs line up here. Oh, this is a lot smaller. I wonder what this is for. Huh, that's interesting. Yeah, this is smaller. I wonder what he was working on with this, or if he was starting this off on a different car. Maybe this would fit the Chevy that he traded in for this guy on the sale paperwork. Don Lee Cadillac. That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that until now. So I got 4 of these, and they don't fit this Cadillac. So what was he working on? So I got all these parts with this car. So there's 2 more halves for the rear brakes. And then this is really cool looking. Oh, check that out. I don't know if this was like his newest prototype that he hadn't put on a car yet, or are we looking at something from a real manufacturer? Because this is pretty polished. So it's got this band on here. I'm gonna set the phone down for a minute. It's got this band on here to hold everything together, I believe, as if it was the drum, or maybe to show sort of what the drum looked like. But he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cylinders here, each to a correlating shoe. And he's got these cool springs holding everything together, which is just a spring plate, and then it turns 90 around each of these studs. And this cool triangular piece, which is each part of the casting with this. But yeah, look at that. So the plate goes over this as sort of a fulcrum, and then bends around to this. So it's sort of a leaf spring to suck the shoes back down. Wow, that's cool. And then just one air inlet here, and then this feeds all 6 of these bad boys. And this is just for each of the triangular pieces here. So maybe they're not. Oh, so wow, look at that. They look like they're brass. That's interesting. Okay, so these aren't part of the casting. These are brass, and then they're inserted into the casting. But man, that thing looks pretty sweet. I'm not sure how then do you attach this to the vehicle. Now, interesting about this as well, it also is a smaller diameter than our Cadillac stuff. So again, what is this? Is this from a different car? This is also a bit bigger. What was he making that for? Did he even make that? Am I looking at some real air brake system that wasn't part of Mr. Ward's deal? And this is a hair smaller, but that's about the same size. So what was he working on with this that could use that? Some more cool leather wrap stuff. This is the steering arm, and then the leaf springs are wrapped up here as well. Check out those gigantic mufflers, pretty awesome.